Well, here we are on a Monday morning, and well, there's so much to talk about, really, Pat. Will we talk about things personal, or will we talk about things public, Pat?
This one might be personal or public. we,
Well,
were, we,
all
we were both we were both at the Ireland's Future thing on Saturday.
that's
What do you
right.
make of it?
Uh,
By the way, just one thing. I saw a wee bit on Facebook, or not Facebook, Twitter or X as it's called these days, trying to suggest it was a failure. From the usual sources.
hmm.
The loyalists, some sort of far, well, what do you say, extreme loyalism, and maybe
Hmm.
not so extreme, but Jude, anybody that tries to say that on a Saturday morning, a wet Saturday morning, getting a couple of thousand people to give up 3 or 4 hours to discuss fairly dry politics, I don't think, and the place was packed. So anyway, I'm just putting that on the record. I thought it was a ridiculous thing to say.
I saw the second last item actually, which was Leo Varadkar, and you had to leave before that. I'm just interested in it particularly because I heard Nolan this morning, and Nolan was talking about the need for an apology from Sinn Fein and I suppose nationalism generally for the IRA campaign. And he was talking to, I think, Kevin Maher, and Nolan said, "Oh, no, Leo Varadkar brought this up himself." I don't actually think that's the case. I'm almost certain, I have taped it now, so I'll go back to it and confirm that, but I'm almost certain that the interviewer, who was one of the Fitzpatricks, Jim Fitzpatrick, maybe, he asked about that specifically. Should there be an apology from, Republicans? And then, of course, Leo had a say. But I thought it was a bit deceptive, really, to say on the one hand that this was brought up by Leo Varadkar, as distinct from this was Leo Varadkar responding to a question put to him. Do you see
Yeah.
that as a significant difference or not, Pat?
Absolutely. You see, here's the thing. I think there's some other guy, some guy, Philip McCarry or some OBE,
Yeah, yeah, I did a blog of that.
said the same. Jude, you see, I don't buy this. Right. Here's the thing. I am not, as I put on the record on many occasions, I am not an IRA supporter, and I didn't support the violent campaign either. But I don't think it's going to help any by asking people to apologise for what happened in the past. That's like apologising for history, right? If we're going to go down this road, will the UVF of 1912 apologise for bringing guns into Northern Ireland? Will the Unionists apologise for 50 years of bigotry, discrimination, and whatever? Well, all the things that sort of happened over those years. What about the loyalists? Will they apologise for what they did? What about the UDR, the RUC? Where are we going to stop with all this sort of stuff? So, Jude, the past is the past. You don't have to agree with it. You don't have to like it. But I don't think asking Republicans who lived in a northern state under 50 years of discrimination and misrule and subjugation and oppression are going to sort of turn around and say, "Oh, sorry, we apologize for fighting back." And that's
Yeah,
how a lot of them say, you know.
yeah, I exactly, Pat. Those are my own sentiments. I think actually it's a bit of a distraction because it was just one item in the entire convention or gathering. What would you say it was a significant event, Pat? I mean, just
I would,
overall,
Judd, I would.
did it indicate anything new?
And I don't know if it indicated a new, but Judd, here there was one thing, and I think you pointed out as at morning. There's one thing that I think did. There, 2030 now seems to be a nailed down
Mm.
date for the
Mhm.
border pool, and I think that was significant. And Judd, the range of people coming on board seems to be growing. And Judd, unlike Brexit and several other things, this seems to be gathering momentum in a way that it's actually fully planned and explored. Brenton O'Leary, Professor Brenton O'Leary, set it out very well at the start, Jude. And I think if anybody wants to come there, it was both a very dry, well, what do you say? There's a lot of detail, a lot of statistics, and all. Yet at the same time, strangely entertaining. And he did it very well. He's a
Well,
very polished performer. What was very dry material, he actually got across very well. And Jude, I think that's what's been, unlike the Brits and their Brexit, when there's a whole lot of, like Boris Johnson was able to say, we have an oven-ready deal done, and people voted for it, and they turned out, and it's quite clear there was no oven-ready deal done, and look where the Tories are now.
Yes.
Right. The people doing the border poll should not make that mistake.
Yeah, I think they have, in fact, been aware of that for some time, and that is a confirmation of it. Let me just mention some of the people that were there. One of the things that impressed me was the range of people that were there.
Yeah.
And I mean, these are big hitters, and yet they got very little time. In fact, if anything, a bit like Sinn Féin's running candidates, there was maybe too many of them for you to say it again. There was, for example, the thing lasted for 4 hours. There's no break.
Yeah.
You know, take your own break. But among the people there was Mick Lynch, the unionist, trade unionist from Britain, Davy Adams of the UDA, Wallace Thompson, the DUP, Leo Varadkar of Fine Gael, Jim O'Callaghan of Fianna Fáil, Brendan O'Leary from Pennsylvania University, Pat+Jude of Intu. I mean, that's just some of them. Mary Lou was there too as well.
And so Michelle.
A real range of voices. And to be honest with you, the only one who was opposing note, and even he was very minor, I thought, was Davy Adams. His complaint was not so much the idea of having a united Ireland, but he felt that some of the shared island people, not shared island, but the Ireland's future people, had written a column which was a bit critical of unionism, and he felt that was insulting. But overall, virtually everybody was in favour of it. I was very struck by that breadth of almost a sort of a citizens' assembly in a way of people from the South and other places, from America and from Britain. That such a variety could be presented in an afternoon. I think, would you be like me, Pat? I wanted to, I suppose they'd done 2 sessions, one Saturday after another, and divided it up so that those people like the likes of, Brendan O'Leary got time, Leo Varadkar got time, but Jim O'Callaghan got very little time, Pat+Jude got very little time, Mary Lou McDonald got very little time. So there's quite a few other significant actors who really just got to answer a few questions, then they hurry them off because there's another act coming on.
Yeah.
Was it too rushed, do you think, maybe?
I think it was. There was almost like too many cooks there. Nobody got too much time in the kitchen. There was definitely an element of that. Like Pat+Jude was only getting started. Jim O'Callaghan, I think, answered for about 3 seconds. I'm sure he must have said to himself, "This is a waste of my time coming all the way down from Dublin for this," and so on. And you're right, Jude. As well as that, I'm not so sure if it would work, but there should have been some element of audience participation as well. Questions from the floor. This it's almost as if it was too big, and they wanted to rush people. And like, what do you call him too? The Jim Sheridan, the film director, producer, was there. And like he was sitting on the seat, and I presume he was in the wrong seat. He says, "All I can hear is somebody in the ear saying, wrap it up, wrap it up." so no, I think you're right. Now, whether you could get people to show up twice is a different matter. But the whole thing did seem a wee bit rushed.
Well, they wouldn't have to turn up. Oh, yeah, you mean the audience to turn up twice? Yeah, well. Okay, a couple of things I want to make a point on. One of the things that impressed me was Dr. Tom Black, that guy who was the BMA. He was comparing the NHS in the north with Sláintecare in the south, and he said Sláintecare was streets ahead. Now, somebody shortly after that, after he left, and somebody else was on stage, and they said, "No, not so, because of Sláintecare."
That was Phil Hay from the Irish Nursing Organisation.
Yeah,
she said, but her point was, okay, it might be a hell of a lot better. Sláintecare might be a hell of a lot better than care on the current NHS, but that didn't mean it was good.
I thought he raised it. Well, they didn't raise it as clearly as they might have. I in a way, I thought maybe Tom, Dr. Tom, whatever his name is, Hardy.
Tom Black.
Yeah, that he maybe was spreading his points too broadly, like NHS versus Sláintecare. It might have been more interesting to look at it in more detail, or even more fundamentally, and saying,
Jude,
he recommended, Pat, he recommended we all take out insurance in the north.
But he said that he was a socialist who had long opposed private
but he
health
gave it up now,
insurance.
he said.
But he said it's the NHS. By the way, Jude, he was actually quite frightening in many ways. He says the NHS is now so bad that if you're given a sort of, say you need a hip replacement, he basically said it's more than likely you'll die before you'll get your hip replacement. Yeah. Your cancer treatment the same. Mm-hmm. And he said the reason he's now advocating people taking out health insurance is if you can afford it, take out private health insurance for two reasons. Number one, you'll get seen quicker. And number two, you'll take you off the list that somebody else who can't afford it will get on the list.
Well, that's a benign way of looking at the idea of, paying for medicine. I'd be reluctant if it is all possible that you should keep NHS free at the point of delivery and, all throughout your life. And in fact, I had a discussion with some guys on yesterday about this. And we were talking about the fact that after the war, the Second World War, Britain in 1948, I think it was able to set up an NHS, complete NHS, teeth, eyes, the lot, free for everybody, regardless. So they're able to do that. Now, this is a country emerging from a very expensive, I imagine, war, the ruins of a war. They also set up they built council houses like nobody's business. So if Britain, being in those dire straits, was able to not only bring in NHS but also council housing and so on, why couldn't they do it now? I asked that of somebody and they said, well, they wouldn't have the money. And then the point was made, well, they could borrow the money. Is there anything more worthwhile borrowing money for than to keep people alive? Or to have a house?
Tom Black, I actually thought Tom Black was very impressive in many ways. He said, he pointed out that for years, he says, let's get this thing clear. He says, it's, the current state of the NHS is down to one thing, Tory austerity. He says they have underfunded it. It's now understaffed. People are leaving in droves. And he says, and of course, he says, maybe it's even the ideology that they deliberately did this so that people would go for the American insurance, private insurance thing, and so on. So, and he said that not only the Northern Ireland waiting lists are the worst waiting lists by far in the United Kingdom. And he's saying, compared to the South, where there's a lot of complaints, he says the South has almost gold-plated health service nowadays compared to what you get in the North. And for years in the South, they looked enviously towards the North for the NHS. So something big is going. And he says, by the way, Black said as well that it's only going to get worse. So he says he says it's just basically undealable with now the waiting lists in the North. And he says that's the reality. And he says people better face up to that.
But it's astonishing to me, Pat, and you just pointed out that the health service for the last 14 years has been run down under austerity and the Tories. It seems to me unbelievable that a supposedly socialist party, the Labour Party in Britain, wouldn't make that a central point of their platform to say, we will repair the NHS to the point that it was at when it was created. It should be staring in the face. And people in polls even have said they'd be prepared to pay more taxes as long as they were sure it was going for the NHS. Why in God's name do you think does Starmer not go after that and make that a central issue? I mean, even in terms of humanity, let alone politics.
Yeah. Well, his health guy is Wes Streeting. Wes Streeting, Jude, strikes me as a Tory all day long. Absolutely all day, every day. I don't see, Jude, I've said it a million times, I see zero difference between Starmer's Labour and Sunak's Tories. They basically got the same policies, and Starmer is saying absolutely he's refusing to commit to reforming the NHS. He's refusing to commit to workers' rights. He's refusing to recognise unions type thing and so on. Jude. So I put it like, if I think I was in Britain, I'd be seriously looking at somebody like the Green Party or something, or there's no way I'd be voting Labour.
Yeah, he had an opportunity to make a real distinction between himself and the Tories, and instead of that, he appears to be mimicking them. What about What do you think should follow from that convention yesterday on Saturday? Do you think anything should emerge specifically? Because really what we got was a series of people talking, making points, the audience clapping, and people being impressed with the crowds, and then everybody went home.
Yeah.
Do you think there should
Well,
be anything else?
I think the people behind Ireland's future should actually do sort of a publication of some of the talks, Jude. And I think two in particular that I would recommend is Brendan O'Leary's and what do you call him, Tom Black's. But the other thing, Jude, you mentioned earlier on Davy Adams and Wallace Thompson of the DUP. Davy Adams he said he was going to throw a bit of a wet blanket on it. And one of the things he said was, and it was a fair point. I think it was Brian Finney. He might have been having a go. He says, one of your organisers here is a columnist, and I presume he was referring to the Irish News. So I presume it's Finney. And where he said, basically it was a suggestion of, look, irrespective of whether unionists agree or disagree or loyalists disagree, we don't need you because we're going to outbreed you shortly anyway, and we can vote for United Ireland on our own. Where he said, surely the whole thing should be, it's not just about the greater number. The people should be reaching out and talking to unions and see if they convince them and so on. But then I think Wallace Thompson took that a wee bit further, even though he spoke first. He says that there was a duty on unionists to reach out and talk to their nationalist neighbours. He says, remember he said, Jude, that often unionism come across as triumphalists and supremacists and so on. And he says that annoyed the hell out of the nationalists and so on, that we are entitled to walk down every street and to hell with your Irish language and all this sort of stuff. So, Jude, I think maybe it's ground setting. Look, here's the problems. Remember too, Jude, there was this thing about, I think it was O'Leary mentioned this thing about the Commonwealth and all those sort of things, and the national anthem and the flag, all those things, Jude. It's basically teeing them up for discussion. And if it's a catalyst for a discussion on Saturday, which I believe it is, Jude, it's out there now, and there's a lot of stuff now to be built on.
Yeah, that's true. I think, just to come back briefly to Davy Adams, I think he was introducing this idea that there might be a very serious, he said 2 million actually, but it wouldn't be 2 million, reluctant unionists being forced into United Ireland or a New Ireland. But I mean, we've been down this road before. I mean, the Good Friday Agreement said that when a majority of people in the North and the South wanted constitutional change, it would come. So I don't think Davy should be setting up these, nightmare scenarios or hinting at the fact that.
No, in fact, you're right. But what I think he says, the sudden inclusion of 2 million Northerners, I think he said, rather than unionists.
Oh, was it? Did he say 2 million Northerners? Maybe they're talking about people like me.
Because he basically said, how do you, I think he was sort of saying, like, Jesus, Jude, there isn't anywhere near 2 million unions. What is it, 850,000 at most? So, what do you call it? I think the implication was that the sort of summation, or what's the word, Jude, of taking in 2 million people into the southern system, it's going to be quite an upheaval.
Well, it is indeed. Of course it is. And that's, I think, that's why Fine Gael and Fianna Fáil up to now have been resisting it on all fronts, while at the same time throwing shapes to suggest that they're very much for it. But maybe they have reached a conversion point. There's two things finally I would say about this. One is, I always feel this, that here was this great body of people. There was at least 2,000, maybe more, at that yesterday. Why couldn't that goodwill that was there be harnessed by Ireland's future? Now, how that might emerge, I'm not sure. But for example, they could have said to people, if you believe in a reunited Ireland after careful building up and looking at and planning for it, sign this sheet. It could have had a list of people's names that were there who wanted to be involved. I don't think anybody's afraid anymore to say, oh, my name would go out there and people would know that I had been at this Ireland's Future event. I don't think that's something that hold people back. I just feel the Ireland's Future should know who the people are that support them and should find ways of using them. And it might be, I don't know, you could maybe a local or small scale citizens assembly looking at, what does it mean for our area, and let's think about this. I just feel there's a need to let people feel they're a part of these things. And they could, surely to God, that all that goodwill should be translated into something concrete rather than saying, oh, that's great, you're feeling better now, and off you go. And I think the media, for example, and maybe you suggested that the media should have reports on regular basis as to what Ireland's future is doing and what developments there are, and has there been a mini citizens assembly,
Yeah.
and so on. So just to keep the thing sort of coherent and tight and advancing beyond just that big event. I think that's rather a waste.
You said something there just struck, we triggered in my brain. Remember Amanda Ferguson said then that I think she must have got some abuse for being involved with the Ireland's future. And remember Naomi Long, she pulled out. Remember, and somebody said, you can imagine in East Belfast, East Belfast, I think it is East Belfast she's standing in, that how the loyalists and the unionists would use that. Here she's a proto-nationalist, if you've seen at the Ireland's Future event. So maybe you said it's no longer a big issue. And I don't think it is, Jude, because I think now when you get quite a range of people there, from Leo Varadkar to Wallace Thompson to Davy Adams to all sorts of people, it's gone mainstream. It's no longer a dirty little secret that only the nationalists can discuss. So I take that point, but I don't know, Jude, if it's still, if you look at some of the Twitter stuff, it's vitriolic, but like it's from the usual suspects. So no.
Well, I noticed in Nolan this morning that they're trying to zero in on the Leo Varadkar thing about when he was asked about an apology by the IRA or by Republicans. They're trying to make that the big story of it, and really, I didn't see that at all. I mean, you weren't even there when Varadkar was talking, and you were impressed by the whole range that came for most of the day.
But remember the first one? I remember Colin Harvey got very uptight about it. He said, remember they said there was no unionist voices. He says the whole idea of the thing was to get nationalism together. It wasn't excluding unions. It was about seeing where nationalism was at. And he said it was deliberately sort of, what would you say? The narrative was deliberately put out there. It was like, no, on a par with Black Lives Matter, no, all lives matter. Like it's deliberately ignoring what the thing was about in the first place. I remember that he said there was almost an agenda by Nolan and Talkback to sort of smear it. And I think half the time Nolan, they're looking for an angle to this thing about an IRA apology. Jude, that didn't come up at all on Saturday, and it just wasn't discussed. It was about the future, not the past.
Well, Varadkar did it. I mean, when he was asked about it, he did.
But he was asked, Jude,
and he didn't really talk about it very much. I hardly noticed it. In fact, anyway, okay. Do you have a final question? Do you feel that we have moved forward? Do you feel we're at a tipping point? Do you feel some significant?
I don't know if we're at a tipping point, Jude, but we've definitely moved forward. To quote yourself, it's gone definitely. That's the second one, Jude. And right, Jude, there's the other thing. There's about maybe 2,000-3,000 people in that hall. A lot of them, whether you like it or not, are probably influencers of a certain kind. They were motivated enough. Well, people like me and you to show up on a Saturday morning and Belfast to sit for. I must have about the last 20 minutes because I had to go and so on. And Jude, I got in. I did find it very interesting. There was a whole lot of stuff there that I thought, geez, this is So Jude, it's going to go on out. And if you had asked me 10 years ago, Jude, it simply wouldn't have happened. But it is happening now.
I think that's the point. I was talking to a woman before I met you, and at the hall, and she was saying, if imagine if my mother was still alive, this would be such an important day for her. And there was almost tears in her eyes. It's only at that point I began to realize for some people this is very, very important in terms of the progress that nationalism has made. All right, okay, let's move on to the Irish Times has an editorial on Sinn Fein, and let's face it, it's relatively poor performance in the elections, the recent local elections and the European elections. It says Sinn Fein has fallen dramatically from 2020. and that it was a stunning fall from grace. And it said the reason it says this happened was because Sinn Fein was repositioning itself from being a party of protest to being a party of government, and therefore was modulating its views. You had Pierce Doherty going to that financial place, and the Sinn Fein, the Irish Times suggests, Sinn Fein lost its, or was failing to address or include its base voter. Does that seem a reasonable argument to you, Pat? Does that explain away the loss?
It does, Judah. Without question, it does. I think, we mentioned this on Saturday or Friday. Sinn Féin was the party of protest. And by the way, I think we needed a party of protest. There was this lovely little cozy consensus in the Republic. Like, Jude, these days, can anybody tell the difference between Fianna Fáil and Fine Gael? I can't tell them. And, and their ministers are almost interchangeable. Some days I have to ask myself, is he Fianna Fáil or Fine Gael type thing? Because they all sound the same, and they're all singing from the same hymn sheet. So Jude, after the crisis in particular, there was uniformity between Fianna Fáil, Fine Gael, and Labour, of all things, that we look after the bankers and charge the working people. There were all sorts of new charges proposed, including water charges and all the rest of it, which, by the way, were opposed from the ground up, not the top down. So basically, Sinn Féin were seen as a radical party looking after the needs of the working people, and on many levels. Right, and let's now fast forward. In recent times, Mary Lou they went to Washington to St. Patrick's Day, despite the fact that their core group was not very happy about the fact that they were going along to support Joe Biden and the Israeli policy and all that sort of stuff. They're also repositioning. Like Pierce Doherty went over to London to see the finance houses, and as I said on Friday, remember Davy stockbrokers spun it that Sinn Féin and government would be more like New Labour than Corbyn's Labour. So suddenly there was a rush towards the centre, and a lot of their base are the people who are struggling to get a house, struggling to get a hospital appointment, and all the rest of it. And the sort of unique selling point of Sinn Féin was they were different, and they were rushing to be the same. And so, Jude, there's a sort of dichotomy there. Like, which are they? Are they a radical party, or do they want to go towards the centre ground?
Well, I suppose they like to be reasonably radical, while at the same time maintaining their base. I think they have to bring in the middle class. If they only work on terms of working class people, if that's their only voters, they'll not win an election.
No.
And I think they felt that they'd done so well the last time that they could inch towards including more of middle class concerns. It's a hard one to answer. I can't help but think that there was a note of glee in the Irish Times editorial.
Of course there was.
The extent to which they had tumbled from their mighty perch. And I was thinking of Ferguson. Was it Ferguson that said he wanted to knock Liverpool off their effing
after effing perch? But you know, as I said the last day on Friday, you know the thing about it, Sinn Féin is not a well-organised party at local level. It definitely isn't.
That's astonishing to hear you say that, Pat.
But here's the other thing. For years in the Republic, like there's families, like there's Fianna Fáil families, there's Fine Gael families, and some of these people have been, their daddy was a councillor, or their grandfather was a councillor, their daddy or mammy was a councillor, and now they're a councillor. And people vote for them for a whole myriad of reasons, and so on. And then Sinn Féin, who has had, like Sinn Féin, Jude, on about 30 years ago, or even 25 years ago, were on 2% of the vote in the Republic. They have no sort of foundation in the same way as Fianna Fáil and Fine Gael. So even when it comes to local elections, I think Sinn Féin are starting from, they're almost behind the 8 ball right from the start. But the general election is a very different ballgame. Now, okay, there's all sorts, and you mentioned it in Irish Times. They're trying now to find a sort of centrist, radical report, and they're giving up this sort of very sort of party of protest image, or they're trying to get rid of it, that they will be a serious partner in government and so on. But it's a difficult transition.
Somebody, Pat, who watches this, said that they thought we should give a prognosis or give our view of how the election, presumably they're talking about the election in the south, but it might have been in the north as well. We should give our vision of what will be the outcome at the end. How will Sinn Fein do? How will the Fianna Fáil do? How will Fine Gael do? And so on. Do you think we should do that or not?
Yeah, why not? Jude, if you're asking me, I would think Sinn Fein are going to do a hell of a lot better in the general election than they will at the local government elections in Europe. They seem to, the whole thing seemed to, I said it on Friday, so I'm going to repeat it. See, in the north, Sinn Fein have got the old heads, the strategists, the guys who know the right thing to say and the right thing to do. Maybe it's because of the war, I don't know. See, down south, they can I don't know what it is. They won at the first election, the general election, they ran too few candidates. At the local government elections, they ran too many. They seem to, the old heads in the north don't seem to be available down south. They seem to get a lot of things wrong, and when it comes to sort of, even do you remember I was saying after the Dublin riots, the far right?
Yes.
Instead of having a go at the far right rioters, which they should have done, they had to go with the Gardaí for not sorting it out. That struck the wrong tone. I know, and somebody should have told Mary Lou, look, save the criticism of the Gardaí, which was legitimate, by the way. It wasn't a legitimate criticism. It was totally legitimate. It was so bad. It was Keystone Cops policing. But that's not the point. Who was the greater offender? It wasn't the Gardaí. It was the rioters.
This is, this is a problem that goes on and on. I was just going to throw in a topic we hadn't planned to talk about, Pat, and that was the fact that there was posters of the Alliance Party ripped down and replaced by, I think it was UDA or UVF posters.
Yeah.
And this was close to, right beside virtually, the training college for the PSNI. And the PSNI said, were asked about this, and they said it wasn't their job to, follow up on people who ripped down posters.
Yeah.
Does that make sense to you?
No, I can see why probably legally they say, look, wait a minute, that's a political issue between the political parties. But hey, let's be honest, Jude. See, when it's the UVF and all the rest of it, it's a threatening thing. By the way, Jude, here's you just strike another. There was someone came up on social media the last day of as a UDA commander, and all these guys out in the street with their white shirts and black ties welcoming the new commander.
UVF.
UVF. Tell me something. Remember when these guys all signed up to the Good Friday Agreement and got their monies and whatever? They were a clear and abject apology for past wrongs, according to Gussie Spence. How come they're all back out in uniform and so on? And why isn't the police service doing nothing about it?
Well, I'm speechless at that.
Here's the other thing. Why isn't Nolan? Can you imagine, Jude, for 1 second, if 200 or 300 Republicans with berets, white shirts, black ties, lined the route, and sort of like a people parade down. Can you imagine the absolute shitstorm in the media, the outrage, and so on? How come it's not mentioned?
Yeah, well, you said 200 or 300. This was 1,200, I believe, UVF people. Well, actually, Nolan did deal with that to a certain extent today.
But you never, no. Jackie, remember Sinn Féin's attendance at Bobby Story's funeral? It went on for weeks.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. He said that was what he was dealing with, but actually he found himself dealing with this question of Republicans apologizing. I mean, I could go on for quite a while about that, but I won't. Finally, I think this is probably the last item. Yes, it is, because it's only 3 minutes. There's a question in one of the papers today about how effective a party being endorsed by a celebrity will be for their cause. And they seem to suggest that's a thing of the past. No longer well, some celeb who say, oh yeah, I'm behind New Labour or whatever, that won't work anymore. It doesn't work anymore. Do you think that's the case?
I think it is to an extent, Jude. I remember at one stage, was it some big Hollywood star when was it behind Bill Clinton and it made a big difference and all the rest of it? Jude,
Charlie Haughey and Stephen Roach is a good example. Stephen Roach didn't endorse Charlie, but Charlie Roach too.
Charlie endorsed him. Charlie flew all the way to Paris to be seen with the winner of the Tour de France. No, Jude, what I think is sort of happening, I think it's lost a bit of its impact because there's I think a lot of people sort of saying, like, what's in it for them? But I haven't said that. I'm sure it does them no harm. And it's probably good on social media. Like, for instance, Eric Clapton has come out and supported Andrew Feinstein against Starmer and Clacton, or whatever the hell it is, wherever he's standing. Yeah. And Carol Vorderman, she has been anti-Tory, but she's been very, very good. No, but she's not really endorsing Labour, but she's actually exposed some of the corruption of the Tories. So, I don't know. Anyway, what's your opinion?
Well, I'm sort of caught in between. I still think that when you see a party member or a candidate alongside somebody who's an actor or a singer or whatever, and one that you like, it does add a little bit of glitz, What are you laughing at? What are you laughing at?
Somebody's just knocked at my window.
I thought it was something I'd said. I thought you were admiring my wit, my early morning wit, and all the time. Just somebody.
No, how much protection we have in the studio. I heard somebody saying, "Oh shit, Pat's on."
Okay, Pat, I can't count that one. Can't count that one. But listen carefully.
Okay, Jude. See you later.
Right, all the best.
All the best, Jude.
Very good. Very good. I enjoyed Saturday no end. I enjoyed it no end. I really did. And I came away with a sense that things have really changed. I really did.
Jude, even Jude, and seeing the 40 years, and when I first went into Derry and seeing a big change, massive change. The Nationals are no longer scared to put their head above the parapet.
You should just push it on in an organised way now. Okay, Pat.
Okay, Jude.
Enjoy your week. Get Garvin Downey, by the way. Set up Garvin.
I will.
Okay.